Back in 2018, my family finally stepped into a new chapter of our lives. After years of cramped living in an apartment, we had scraped together enough money to put down a deposit on a house in a developing neighborhood. It felt like a dream come true, a sign that we were finally moving forward. My wife had recently landed a steady job, and together we managed to build a modest, comfortable life for our small family. We had two boys by then, one 11 years old and the other 13. At first, everything felt hopeful and promising, and we were all busy adjusting to our new surroundings. But as the first few weeks passed, strange occurrences began to emerge that would eventually haunt me for years to come. I remember one warm afternoon vividly, a day that started with a sense of adventure. My wife and I had taken advantage of a rare, quiet moment and decided to take a stroll into a part of the neighborhood that was still wild and untamed. We had discovered a narrow trail that wound its way into the woods just far enough from our new home to promise an escape from the sterile order of suburban life. For us, taking a walk or even going on a small hike was a ritual. It not only provided exercise and a break from daily routines, but also allowed us to explore new corners of this developing area where old woods and traces of nature still held sway over modern construction. That day, our exploration led us quite far. We walked deep into the woods, following the trail until it gradually faded into something less defined, a path that seemed more like a natural clearing than a designated route. As we continued, I began to notice the remnants of human activity scattered among the trees. Huge trash piles were piled haphazardly across the clearing. At first, I assumed it must be related to some construction project or abandoned work site. There were black plastic bags filled with junk, random items that one might expect to be discarded in a hurry, and piles of miscellaneous debris. However, among these piles were items that were undeniably out of place. I saw, for example, an old torn-up couch sitting isolated in one spot, and right next to it, a toboggan, its once bright colors now faded and peeling. It was an odd furniture and a toy meant for icy winters lying in the middle of a sun-soaked summer wood. My wife and I exchanged curious, puzzled glances as we approached the area. The couch, positioned deliberately on the ground in this forgotten corner of the forest, had two trash bags resting on top of it. One bag was neatly tied, while the other appeared ripped open, as though someone had forcefully torn it apart. Driven by a mixture of cautious intrigue and the natural curiosity that comes from spending time alone in the wild, I moved closer with my wife, trailing behind me. I slowly pried open the loose bag, and as I did, it began to spill its contents. Out tumbled a multitude of old dolls, vintage, antique-looking dolls that were nothing like the modern plastic toys most children today play with. They had a haunting quality. Their glass eyes, cracked porcelain faces, and faded, tattered clothing spoke of a bygone era, the bagrier of age. A stale, musty odor reminiscent of forgotten attics and long-abandoned heirlooms. I nearly choked on the smell, a mixture of decay and old memories. My wife, in contrast, burst out laughing at the absurdity of it all. She had grown up playing with dolls and found them endearing, rather than creepy. And her laughter, light and dismissive, only made me feel more uneasy. I couldn't shake the thought that these dolls might be more than mere discarded toys. They somehow seemed to hold a secret, a story that belonged to this desolate wilderness. We spent a few minutes sifting through the scattered remnants, finding other small antiques that appeared deliberately placed. Yet nothing else seemed as startling as that sudden cascade of old dolls. When we finally decided we had seen enough, we left the clearing and made our way back toward the trail. As we exited the clearing, I distinctly remember hearing in the distance the faint sound of a child laughing. A sound so soft and fleeting that I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. I turned to my wife, asking if she had heard it, too, but she simply shook her head in confusion, dismissing it as nothing more than the wind or my overactive mind reacting to the strange discovery. We walked in silence for a while, both of us lost in thought about the inexplicable oddity we had just witnessed, and eventually resumed our journey, following the thinning path, until we retraced our steps back to the edge of the woods and ultimately back to our neighborhood. That ride back through the dimming forest was silent, except for our occasional conversation about what had just happened. My wife would tease me lightly about being so rattled by a bunch of old dolls, but I couldn't shake off the disturbing feeling that something about that clearing was not quite right. The strange presence in that patch of wilderness, the inexplicable trash and antiques, and even that faint sound of childlike laughter had left an imprint on my mind. A tiny nagging reminder that there are corners of this world where the modern and the ancient, the mundane and the mysterious calls in ways that defy easy explanation. In the days that followed, life in our new neighborhood resumed its normal rhythm. The house felt like a fresh start, a promise of stability and progress. And my wife and I settled into a comfortable routine. Our two boys, full of the mischievous energy that only children possess, kept us busy with video games, laughter, and the occasional burst of troublemaking. Life seemed ordinary, filled with the simple joys of family life in a newly purchased home. It was then, several weeks after our return, that an entirely different, more chilling series of events began to unfold. One night after a hearty supper and a family movie, our house fell into the quiet of slumber. The boys, who sometimes proved to be delightful troublemakers, had been coaxed into bed by my wife. My wife and I, feeling relaxed and content after a pleasant evening, eventually retired for the night as well. It was around midnight when I was suddenly awoken by multiple insistent rings of our doorbell. The sound was so startling, so out of place at that hour, that it made me jump in bed. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and in an instinctive rush, I got up to check the situation. First, I went upstairs to peer out of our window, carefully scanning our driveway in the darkness for any sign of a visitor. There was nothing visible. The only light came from the soft glow of street lamps in the distance, barely illuminating our quiet front yard. With nothing in sight, I returned downstairs with my wife a few steps behind me, our steps cautious and uncertain. My hand trembled as I opened the front door, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lingering outside. Instead, I was met with nothing but darkness and silence, a void that seemed as empty as it was unnerving. I armed myself with my pistol from the closet just in case, and stepped outside to search for any clues. But the air was still, the night completely silent, except for our own nervous breaths. I whispered to my two sons, who had been roused by the commotion, "Stay in bed." Their eyes were wide with sleep-muddled fear as I patrolled the dark threshold, my pistol clutched tightly in my hand. Still, there was no sign of any intruder. The silence remained unbroken, and no footsteps or voices followed the abrupt chimes of the doorbell. We stayed up that night. My wife and I huddled together in the living room, alert and on edge, until the first light of dawn crept in. No one returned that night, and gradually, a sense of fragile calm began to reassert itself. The following day, life continued on as normal. Although the unsettling events of that midnight incident lingered in the back of our minds, we left the house during the day, sending the boys off to summer camp and taking a leisurely stroll or run errands in the neighborhood. It wasn't until later that evening, after we returned, that another bizarre occurrence would test our collective nerves. As we approached the front porch in the dark, one of my sons pointed excitedly and shouted, "Hey, Dad, look, a package." My wife and I exchanged puzzled glances. None of us had ordered anything, and there was no delivery notice. The package lay on our doorstep as if placed there deliberately. I carefully picked it up and examined it under the meager light filtering through the window. It turned out not to be a package at all, but rather an old board game of sorts, something that looked distinctly out of place and almost antique in style. The wooden box was in rough condition, but sturdy, and upon closer inspection, it appeared to be a Ouija board, aged by time, nearly to the point of decay. I felt a knot of apprehension tighten in my stomach. How had this board ended up on our porch? And was it connected in some way to the other strange events we had been experiencing? My wife quickly instructed our two boys to go upstairs while she and I examined the find. We reported the incident to the police, who arrived within a short while. The officers took our statement and even examined the board game carefully. They advised us to stay away from that area for a while, as they had received similar reports from others in the town about odd occurrences. According to the officers, the local authorities had found evidence in the surrounding area, dolls hanging from trees, discarded bags filled with what appeared to be old animal bones, and the remnants of a burnt Ouija board. They had even discovered an abandoned house deep in the forest where these oddities seemed to converge, though nothing concrete was ever proven. The police's explanation that a couple of drunken, curious vagrants had caused all the commotion did little to reassure me. Their cold, detached summary only deepened the sense of foreboding, and I couldn't help but feel that the real story lay somewhere beyond the reach of official explanation. The strange events continued to weigh on us. Not long after that disconcerting incident, we began to consider leaving the house. The new neighborhood, despite its promise and relative modernity, had become a place filled with inexplicable occurrences, tiny sounds, and odd movements that hinted at a presence we couldn't quite see. Ultimately, after only a month of living there, we made the difficult decision to move. We found a new house about 30 minutes away in an already established neighborhood, a place that promised stability and normally. It was a relief to leave behind the unsettling aura that seemed to saturate every corner of that first house. Yet, a strange part of me remained haunted by the memories of what we had experienced. Even as we prepared for the move, one final event took place that would seal the eerie legacy of our time there. During the last week before we left, on a night around midnight, someone rang our doorbell again. This time, there was only one ring. It was brief, almost as if it were just a test of our nerves. We didn't answer the door. We simply retreated inside, our hearts still pounding from previous encounters. The following morning, as I rose early to begin the day's routine, I stepped out onto our front porch and froze. There, lying on the doorstep, was the head of one of those old dolls from that trash bag in the woods, its features grotesque, and its glassy eyes staring blankly up at the sky. It was as if someone had taken it, and in a moment of inexplicable anger or mischief, ripped the head from the doll and left it as a sinister token. I stood there for a long moment, unable to comprehend the symbolism of this final act. Without a word to my wife, I gathered my courage and disposed of the head, tossing it into the trash. We pretended it never happened, but I could never fully forget that final unnerving gesture. Now, many years have passed since that time, and I have built a new life in a different neighborhood, a place with a sense of normalcy that I almost take for granted. But when I think back to those days, a chill runs down my spine. I often wonder who could have been responsible for all those strange events. Was it the work of vagrant troublemakers with too much time on their hands? Or was something more mysterious at play? Some unseen force or spirit that made itself known in subtle, disjointed ways? The imagery lingers in my mind. The abandoned dolls in the woods that poured out from a ripped bag. That unsettling night when our doorbell rang repeatedly in the dead of night, followed by the discovery of a century-old Ouija board on our doorstep, and finally, that last haunting discovery, the severed head of a doll left as if to warn us away. Each of these moments, taken individually, might have been dismissed as coincidences or pranks, yet together, they formed a tapestry of inexplicable events that defied logical explanation. I sometimes recall lying awake at night thinking of the mysterious events that had unfolded in that house. I would remember the constant hum of unanswered questions, the heavy silence that followed each strange occurrence, and the pervasive feeling that we were never truly alone. Even now, as an adult and a father, I carry that memory like a small, dark secret. I see it in moments of quiet, a flicker of light in an otherwise normal sky, a soft creak of a door I know should be locked, or even in the distant echo of a sound that seems to coordinate it to be random. The unknown, I have learned, is powerful precisely because it is unknown. It looms over you in moments of solitude and uncertainty, a reminder that not everything in the world can be neatly categorized or rationalized. I often wonder what would have happened if we had stayed in that house a bit longer, if perhaps the strange events had escalated further. Were we lucky that nothing truly harmful ever came our way? Or were we merely the unwitting subjects of a mystery that was never fully revealed? My father would sometimes speculate that the unsettling occurrences might have been the work of a spirit, a ghost of a man who once lived in that old dilapidated house or in the surrounding area, a presence that seemed to fixate on us in subtle ways without ever overtly harming us. I, on the other hand, have always been left with questions that remain unanswered. I still recall the strange coincidences, the eerie arrangement of dolls, the inexplicable ringing of our doorbell in the dead of night, and that final bitter token left on our doorstep. These events, though they may have been isolated incidents in the grand scheme of our lives, altered my sense of security and gradually seeped into the way I viewed the world around me. My wife and I often talk about that time, trying to understand if there was a logical explanation or if we were simply caught in the midst of events that defied reason. Sometimes we suspect that someone was playing a cruel trick on us, perhaps a mischievous neighbor, or even someone from the criminal underworld we inadvertently crossed paths with while riding in the desert. Other times, the events seemed too calculated to have been the mere work of pranks. The old Ouija board we found, the antique dolls, and those inexplicable echoes speak of a history beyond our control, a reminder that some things are best left unexplained. As I reflect now standing in the safe harbor of my current home in a well-established neighborhood, I realize that those incidents have become a permanent part of my personal lore. I've grown to accept that the mysteries of the past can continue to cast long shadows over our lives, shaping the way we see our present and future. I have learned through countless sleepless nights and anxious moments that the unknown is not something to be dismissed lightly. It is a reminder that our world is more complex and unpredictable than we might ever imagine. Sometimes a simple unexplainable echo on a dark night can remind us of dangers that are not immediately visible, and that the space between what we understand and what lies beyond can be startlingly thin. In the years since that fateful time, I have watched my children grow up with a sense of cautious wonder. I try to teach them that while the world is filled with beauty, it can also harbor secrets that defy explanation. I tell them stories of the old days, of nights when the stars themselves seemed to communicate with us, and when a single package on the doorstep could carry a mystery that might last a lifetime. I remind them to always be cautious, to respect the past, even as they embrace the future, and to understand that sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to heed the warnings that at first might seem trivial. Even though I have long since moved on from that early chapter of my life, the memory of those events still lingers like a half-remembered dream. When I sit quietly at night and glance outside, sometimes I still catch a glimpse of the dark, menacing shapes of things I cannot explain. A fleeting shadow on a quiet street, or the distant sound of a doorbell ringing when no one should be there. And in those moments, the past rushes back, vivid and overwhelming. A reminder that the unknown is always just around the corner, waiting for a chance to show itself. I have come to see that my life is a tapestry, woven from both light and shadow. The moments of normalcy, the small victories of everyday life, a warm family dinner, the laughter of my children, the quiet reassurance of a loving spouse are all precious. Yet interwoven with those moments are threads of the inexplicable. Nights when I almost believed that something supernatural had touched our lives. Moments when I questioned everything I thought I knew about safety and home. It is a balance that I have learned to live with. A reminder that the world is never entirely predictable, and that sometimes the things we cannot explain are the very things that make life intriguing. The memories of that period in my life are not just tales of terror. They are lessons. They taught me to be vigilant, to trust my instincts, even when the logical explanations seem insufficient. They taught me that if something seems too strange to be random, it might indeed be a signal of a deeper mystery, a mystery that can change you if you let it. And though I may never fully understand what happened that night, the experience has instilled in me a healthy respect for the forces beyond our control. Today, as I work as a father and as a husband, I sometimes catch myself glancing at the night sky, wondering if the strange echoes of the past still resonate somewhere out there in the darkness. I think about the long, unpredictable rides through desolate moonlit deserts, about the mysterious lights that blinked to life and disappeared without trace, and about the moments when the quiet of the night was broken by sounds that could not be explained away by the normal workings of nature. I sometimes feel that the haunting presence of those nights, the surreal combination of adventure, risk, and the raw, unfiltered power of the unknown, has taught me more about life than any other experience. Looking back, I realize that the decisions I made in my youth, the choices driven by a mix of youthful bravado and innocent curiosity, have shaped who I am today. I have learned to be cautious, not because I want to live in fear, but because I understand that the world is layered and that even in the midst of comfort and progress, ancient and unexplainable forces may stir. I've learned that sometimes a seemingly ordinary night can hold a secret that might one day change everything if we are not careful. I share this story not to frighten anyone, but to offer a window into a time when my life was defined by a delicate balance between the familiar and the inexplicable. A time when I discovered that sometimes the things we hide in the shadows have a way of finding us, leaving a mark that lasts for years. I hope that by recounting these events, I can remind others to be ever watchful, to cherish the safety of home, and to understand that while progress and modernity bring comfort, they do not erase the mysteries that have been with us for generations. And so, whenever I see a flicker of light in an unfamiliar corner of the sky, or when an unexplained sound drifts through the stillness of a quiet night, I remember that eventful night in the desert. And I am reminded that our world is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Even though I now live in a safe, established neighborhood, and my children are raised in a world of modern comforts, a part of me will always remain that frightened boy in the desert, riding through the starry night, trying to outrun an echo that hinted at danger. I carry that memory with a mixture of pain, caution, and even a strange sort of pride, knowing that it helped mold me into someone who is not easily fooled by the ordinary. In the end, I have come to accept that life is unpredictable and that some mysteries, however frightening, are simply a part of the tapestry of human experience. Our chance encounters, our brief moments of terror, and our unexpected adventures in the middle of the night all contribute to the person we become. I live with the knowledge that while the past may be full of unanswered questions, it also holds the lessons that shape our future. I try to instill that same awareness in my children, that they should be curious, cautious, and respectful of the forces they cannot see. I want them to know that sometimes it is better to listen to the quiet warnings of the universe rather than dismiss them out of hand. Now, years have passed since that fateful night. I have moved on, built a home, raised a family, and managed to bury many of those early memories in the daily bustle of life. Yet when the night is deep and the world is quiet, I sometimes feel a shiver of recognition, a moment when the echoes of the past seem to whisper on the breeze. I have learned to live with those memories, accepting that not everything will be neatly explained, and that sometimes the unknown is something to be both feared and respected. I share this story as a reminder: be cautious in your adventures, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the quiet mysteries that may lie just beyond the edge of the light. The world is vast and full of wonders, but it also holds secrets that can change your life in unexpected ways. And while I now lead a life filled with stability and hope, I will never forget those moments when the desert, the woods, and the darkness converge to reveal that even the simplest things can carry the weight of the unknown.